and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I am Martin Willis, your host. And coming up in just a minute, we have the one and only Alejandro Rojas with UFO updates. Our guest today, this evening, but it's not evening where he is Ben Hurle. He's from Victoria, Melbourne, Australia. And interesting guest. I had him on a number of years ago. He's coming back to tell us what's new in his region of Australia. If you support the show, I want to thank you very much. If you'd like to support us for only $2 or more a month, just go to podcastufo.com. The information's right there. If you can't help us out, you still want to listen to the full shows, you can always watch us live on YouTube, and that is every Wednesday night at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our website or through YouTube. You can also listen on the Dark Matter Digital Network every Thursday from 10 to midnight, and that's Eastern Standard Time. Alejandro, how are you?
I'm good. Sorry, it's just swallowing some water.
I always have perfect timing. Hey, you're going away next week. You're not going to be on the news next week.
I'm sailing away.
Yes, we are.
I don't know the other words. La da da do 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 do.
It's Christopher Cross, right? Isn't that who?
I think so.
Yeah. Well,
I'll be sailing all next week. I'm going to attempt to make it an alien and UFO free week. So it'll be beach and sun.
You may not have any control over that, though. You know.
I never do. Unfortunately, but I mean, if UFOs or aliens appear, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. I'll try to document it, but you probably won't hear about it until I get back, because I'm not going to write the story or anything. I'll document it and then write the story when I get back, and so because I'm chilling.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. Well, and did I hear you say you're going to the Sea of Cortez or something like that?
I'm going to a few places. Yeah, well, I'll be going to Cabo. So I'm going to leave from L.A., and it'll fly down to Baja. And, I'm not familiar with all of the seas that I will be visiting. But, I know I will be on the sea. It'll be the Gulf of California.
Yeah, well, great. Hope you have a wonderful time. So what's happening with the UFO news this week?
UFO news, lots of UFO news. There's some headlines that are kind of cool, so I just want to go over these very quickly. And you can find these if you go to openminds.tv and under the articles and look at daily UFO headlines, because we post them every day. You can see that today's headlines right on the front page, but if you want to see the past ones, you just go to articles and go to daily UFO headlines. And I just want to mention, because there's a couple cool things. Vice has written a story about Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, who was the consultant to the Air Force when they investigated UFOs, who became a UFO believer, essentially, and started, I like to say, he's like the father of modern ufology. He started UFO research afterwards. So that's really cool. That's something to check out. There are some other UFO sightings. But I guess one thing we could talk a little more detail on out of all of these is an article from the Mirror Online talking about Peter Robbins. So you've had Peter Robbins on the show, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great guy. So I've had him on before as well. Known him for years. And to know him is to love him, I feel like. You know,
he's a great guy. Yeah.
But one thing that's probably been difficult for you and has been difficult for me is that early on, having met and researched Larry Warren and his claims, he was the first witness to come forward with Rendlesham. You know, he just says a lot of stuff that is just, I felt from the beginning, blatantly not true. And then more and more has come to light about lies, and even in his professional career, some fraud that he's in trouble for, and that has taken place. Some of which has been regarding some Photoshop stuff, like even a picture that you feel might, you glance in Peter's book might be benign, but it turns out it's attached to this fraud that's been being committed. So Peter has finally come out and said, I don't trust him anymore, and I don't believe everything he's said, interestingly enough. Now, people contend but he was the first one to come out. However, the evidence shows, and a lot of people have argued this. I mean, Linda Howe even said this at our conference 3 years ago, that she believes, and I think she's right, that Larry Warren was there. I mean, he was, but he wasn't part of any of the UFO event. His roommate had told him about it. And in this letter where he says, look, this is proof I was there from it, that he wrote his mom, he says he even refers to something that happened to these other people, not him. So, it's kind of, I feel good that Peter has come out. I think that, I don't know if he's been in denial, but, you know, he's very loyal to his friends. And I think he's very loyal to Larry. And you never want to believe anything that a friend of yours has been deceiving you over something that's so important to you. That's an interesting story. So you can read that on the link there. But another piece of news that I think is good, and I just wrote about this. So I've got a long story, is on 60 Minutes. Robert Bigelow, he's was a real estate mogul. He owns like the budget suites all around the country. So he's this billionaire. Well, some of you probably know, I don't know how much you've covered this on your show, but I've covered it a lot on my show, how Bigelow's been into UFOs for a long time. And in 1995, started an organization, the National Institute for Discovery Science, to research UFOs and other paranormal phenomena. Once that went away, his other interest has been space. He started an organization, Bigelow Aerospace. And it's an interesting story, and I write about it. I write more about the history of Robert Bigelow regarding UFOs and space in my story, because essentially he was into space. He wanted to do something all by himself. He was going to these meetings where NASA was trying to essentially get people to buy into this project that was dying. And he didn't even have a company or anything, and he goes to these meetings. No one wanted to buy the project, so he did, which was essentially these inflatable units that can act as their own space station. They can attach to a space station. They could be used as a moon base, which is something that he's trying to do. And all by himself, he started this up, and now he's a big deal in the industry. So he was on 60 Minutes talking about all of this. He's got an inflatable unit on the International Space Station right now.
Right.
What's cool about Bigelow is that he is into UFOs, and he never shies away about talking about UFOs. So they asked him about UFOs, and he said, sure, I believe in UFOs. I believe that aliens are visiting us, and to me, that's the real deal. So really cool, really bold. It's funny, too, because Laura Logan, the one who interviewed him, she asked, is it risky for you to say in public that you believe in UFOs and aliens? He says, I don't give a damn. I don't care. She said, you don't worry that some people will say, did you hear that guy? He sounds like he's crazy. He said, I don't care. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change reality of what I know.
That's right, yeah. I tried to find this as a video, the interview, and you can't find it anywhere. I thought perhaps 60 Minutes would post it somewhere, but they really haven't. But there are transcripts of the entire interview online. You can find them, even on the 60 Minutes site. And I read through that yesterday. Yeah, I love it. So
I've got a link to that in my story. I've got a link. I put out a transcript of just the UFO portion in my story. And then I go over some of the controversy that's gone on with Bigelow in the UFO community, how they've just been really, a lot of people have been vile and mean. And maybe some of you are going, but I've heard those rumors, Bigelow's a bad dude. Well, read my article, because I go over this. And I do have special insight into some of this because I was on the MUFON. I was the director with MUFON. I was their spokesperson when we went through this procedure of trying to partner with Bigelow Aerospace. And so I give my insight into how that all went down.
Well, can we talk about this just a little bit?
Sure.
The part where I've had people contact me and give their 2 cents, they said something along the line that Bigelow was paying for the reports from MUFON, and then he was like hiding them away or something like that. Can you just kind of put a stop to that rumor?
Yeah. It's so frustrating because it's total BS. Now, I will say this. There was here's where I had a disagreement with the board with MUFON over this whole thing, and it wasn't like a big deal. It was just we were signing non-disclosures. They asked us to sign non-disclosures for people who were involved with the project. It's no big deal. In corporations, non-disclosures is the common thing for practically everything, right. Every partnership. And also, I used anonymous sources that time. I have to. This FLIR expert that I go to for FLIR videos, he doesn't want to share his name because he's a professional. He doesn't want his reputation to get damaged. So that happened. So really, when you get into scientists getting involved with this, we've talked to scientists or other people on that, like, for instance, the UFO data, some of their participants are anonymous because they can't reveal their names. They're scientists. Mm-hmm. So that's what that was about. My argument was this, that if we're going to sign this document, we should tell everybody that we're signing this. And they said, no, let's not do that. We don't want to make a big deal out of it. And I was afraid it's going to get out anyway. So I said, you know what, I'm just not going to sign it. How's that? And what I meant by that is because I was a spokesperson, I didn't want to be responsible for being accused of being a possible potential leaker if something happened, or also just so I wouldn't accidentally say something I shouldn't. I felt it was best I didn't sign it. But there's practically nothing. I got to know all the ins and outs of the projects, and I was there the whole time. That's not what happened. What this was about was they were funding a special group that could get out and investigate UFOs very quickly, a MUFON group. And also they bought some great equipment for this group to use. And if any scientific analysis had to be done, which is expensive, they said they would do it. They also then had a budget, like a monthly budget, going to MUFON to run this program to be able to do this. It did include MUFON forwarding cases to Bigelow Aerospace. That's true. But they post those cases online also. So it was nothing that the public didn't have themselves. And I asked these questions. We all asked these questions. There was nothing Bigelow was provided that the public was not provided. In fact, people said, they were squirreling away cases. That's not true at all. We wrote on openminds.tv about the best cases. I have some links in our story and on Open Minds magazine. So I had access to the best stories. And, once the research was done, like any of the cases, even today, we would post stories about these great cases. So, there was nothing they had, but everyone else had. Also, MUFON was fully in charge of these investigations. One of the other controversies is that, Bigelow was showing up at investigations before. And there has been some shadiness on, to be honest, some of the volunteers of MUFON part around this. Essentially what happened in one instance, MUFON couldn't get people there quick enough. And, time was going, a week, 2 weeks. It was going by. And MUFON couldn't get any investigators there because their investigators are all volunteers. They got to get time off of work. And right. I think this was a place where you had to drive to. And Bigelow wanted to get there. So MUFON told him, it's okay, go ahead and you can get there first, which was against the protocol that was set up. But they got permission. So they went there, they talked to the witnesses, and that was it. And this started this whole rumor that Bigelow was going and like the Men in Black getting in there and talking to witnesses before MUFON. And that was not the case. They never did anything like that without permission. And, you know, there's been people on the MUFON side who have been wobbly about this and unfortunately, and fostering these conspiracy type of things. But it's all BS. I mean, I was there the whole time. So all of this conspiracy stuff and then some other disagreements between money and you know, ego and stuff like this got in the way, and it eventually all fell apart. But it was a great plan if it had all worked out, but unfortunately it didn't.
Right.
But I personally, you know, I know John Alexander, George Knapp, a lot of the people he's worked closely with, Colm Kelleher, and these are all great people and who have just done amazing things for this field, and so has Bigelow. And even when you hear the interviews with him, I mean, I think he's coming from a good place on all of this, and he's a good champion for this topic. And I even go over when Jesse Ventura's people called me and asked me about some of the goofball conspiracy junk they had come up with, stuff that was so silly I had never even heard about. Yeah.
So MUFON has been kind of, I want to say, has been the topic of a lot of ufologists lately. What do you think about that whole situation, Alejandro?
Well, I guess what I'll say, because I've said stuff on social media, even in the Open Minds UFO News group on Facebook. You know, I've posted a little bit and I made some comments. I guess I've shared with you that I'm no fan of the topic of this conference coming up, the next symposium, secret space programs. I don't feel there's any credible information, and I actually feel some of the people they're having are charlatans, to be completely honest. And so I don't feel good about that. I don't think there's evidence. I don't think it has anything to do with UFOs. So I'm not cool with that. I also, you know, a lot of this has to do with John Ventry, the Pennsylvania state director, who had some racist comments to make. He's made some very poorly worded comments, and he's attacked, you know, good researchers in the past. And I've even had to scold him online on social media and in our group. So he's done that in the past, but this racist stuff, it just should not be tolerated at all.
I agree.
And I think that it's unfortunate because when MUFON did come up with their stance, it was like, oh, we can't control what people do on social media. Sure you can. Your leaders, there can be repercussions for that. That's a ridiculous response. Any corporation would let that person go and apologize for the incident taking place, which is what should have happened. And when key members began to say they're leaving, over this whole thing, you know, MUFON did let, and he is no longer a state director and has been let go. And so it was unfortunate they didn't make a quick enough response on that. I would say, you know, with today's leadership, Jan Harzan, the guy who runs MUFON right now, is a great guy. All of the MUFON board have their hearts are in the right place. They want to look for the truth. They want to investigate UFOs. They're all wonderful people and their hearts in the right place. I don't agree with a lot of what they think their direction should be, certainly, but I still have the utmost of professional respect for all of those guys, even if I disagree with like their response to John Ventry. They should have acted quicker and more firmly. But so I don't know. Here again, remember MUFON's made up of thousands of people.
Right.
Everyone who's most part well-intentioned people who just want to learn more and know more. And so, you know, that's what it comes down to. It's a volunteer organization. So does that answer your question?
Yes, Alejandro, I want to thank you for a lot of things, of course, but for actually tackling that very touchy subject. Thank you very much for talking about it. And I never say this enough. Thank you so much for helping us out with the news. I just love you, and I love having you on this show. and it means a lot to me. So,
well, I do feel like you say it enough, and it's my pleasure. I love doing it.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, you have yourself a great time out there on the seas, and be careful. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Talk to you then.
All right. All right. Hang in, everyone. We'll be right back with Ben Hurle. Hey, Ben, welcome to the show.
G'day, Martin. How are you? Thank you for having me on the show, and good evening to all your listeners as well.
Yes. I think you were on, I can't remember, was it 3 years ago or something like that? Time is just going so fast, I can't remember. But
yeah, it's at least a couple of years ago, and at the time I think we had a rather lengthy discussion about the Burke's flat bending headlights case.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah, we'll have to touch on that at some point. But anyway, for the person who is not familiar with you, and also I got to ask you, can you on your Skype screen? I hate to ask this live, but can you close your chat? I can't remember exactly what you do, but I think you click twice on your screen.
Yep. Hold on.
Because it's cutting you right out.
Okay. Yep. That's all done.
I'm seeing it here. Okay. That's all right. I can make an adjustment on this end. Let me make an adjustment. So let's tell the listening audience a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in the topic. Do you actually see you don't see the text messages right beside you on your screen? You do not?
No. It's all
gone.
That
is strange. Okay.
No, it's all.
Let me see if I can figure out.
Yeah.
It might be on my end. Hang on.
You're all right.
I got it. Okay, we're all set. Sorry about that. This is my fault. How about that? Yes, if you would tell them about yourself and how you get interested in the topic. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the organization and some great sightings. And I do want to say this. I think I've mentioned this to you before last time you were on. I think, what does Australia have, like 26 million people or something like that?
That's right. We're a lot less smaller than the United States or Europe. It's a large landmass. It's as big as the United States, but it's very sparsely populated, and that makes it we're very much centric around the capital cities and some larger regional towns in this country. So there's lots of wide open spaces out there where there's hardly any people at all, and that's really made for some wonderful UFO cases that have occurred here over the years. And
I know a lot of people go coastal, along the coast there. But what I wanted to say was that you are the third largest listenership to my shows, your country. And, it's amazing. It's U.S. first, UK. Sometimes UK's been beat out, but Australia's always been in third. So a lot of listeners, a lot of sightings, evidently, right?
There is, absolutely. Yeah, Australians I think in the 21st century we're seeing that, people these days tend to have, I think they're a lot more open to this type of phenomena. I think, and people are not so afraid to come out and talk about their experiences now as they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So, and I think that people are also prepared to a certain extent, challenge the establishment and things like that. So in the past, past, you would, people, if the police said this or the government said this, people would pretty much, toe the line. But now there's a lot more freedom out there, and with the explosion of social media over the last, few years, we've definitely seen a lot more freedom in people's ability to express. Now, some of that's good and some of that's bad as well. And I think that, sometimes, some of the critical aspects of UFO investigation tend to disappear. For our country here, the sightings are occurring on a very regular basis. Now, good sightings or high quality flaps, now they're a little bit rarer, unfortunately. And I think, in the last few years, we've probably been in a little bit of a downward cycle for what I, as a UFO researcher, would call something that had real grit to it. Our reporting line gets a lot of reports coming through, and, a lot of it still is your classic lights in the sky sort of stuff.
Do you think, in your case, I just want to take some examples here, and like Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, all Phoenix Lights. A lot of these are, older cases, but people are still investigating them quite intensely. I just had Don Ledger last week from the Shag Harbor incident. So it's almost like either new things are found out as more witnesses come forward after, say, something's publicized on TV or something like that, and someone says, "Oh yeah, I saw that." Or I don't know if you heard about Kurt Russell recently about the Phoenix Lights. But so, do you have any cases like that where I know there's Westall, where people keep researching them even though they're historical cases?
Absolutely. There's Australia and Victoria, the state where I am, and we'll do a little bit of a brief bio for everybody in a minute. Victoria, the state where I am, is down in the southeastern part of Australia. It's what's the smallest mainland state, but it's had quite a few of Australia's greatest UFO incidences have occurred in our state. And yes, many of those have been investigated over the years, and the Westall one's a classic example of that. That was on the 6th of April 1966, so quite a few years ago now. And that case is continually being investigated, even to this day. In fact, it's probably been investigated more strongly now than it ever has been at any previous point in time. Another classic is the Fred Valentich disappearance in his Cessna over Bass Strait in 1978. Researchers are still working on that case. So these are old chestnuts, but there's still work to be done in those cases, and it's important that we do that. Myself personally, I've taken a slightly different route in my approach to investigation. I am involved in some of those larger cases as well, but I've tended to focus on what I call the forgotten files. The cases that have drifted into urban legend, the cases that have almost fallen off the radar, that appeared in yellowed old newspaper reports from 20, 30 years ago, but effectively for the public now, those cases have been forgotten. So that's where I like to spend my time, looking at perhaps cases that aren't quite so prominent as a Westall / Phoenix Lights situation, and I also look for cases where the object is a little bit different. Not just a classic silvery disc type of a thing. And I look for light cases too, where the light behaves rather unusually. So my ears really prick up when I go through old files and dig through old records, and I find these little cases and they happen to everyday Australians. They're happening to policemen, to farmers, to that type of thing. Everyday Australians, and that's really the lifeblood of the community. And these are the people having these encounters. So I like to spend, a fair amount of time digging through, and I'm hoping to put together a bit of a book of the cases that are there that are really strong, that have credible witnesses, but people in our own country won't know about these cases, let alone anybody in the United States.
Right.
Or the rest of the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I'll just that brief block for you that you asked me, if you like. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, obviously I'm Ben Hurle. Got involved in UFOs from a very early age. I think I was looking at the sky from the minute I could point my head up. And the first books I ever ordered in school book clubs were UFO-related books. And I've had a strong and healthy interest in the unknown my entire life, particularly UFOs. Had a couple of my own sightings that occurred to me as well, which were kind of, personal confirmation that, yes, this is a genuine and real phenomenon that we are dealing with through nothing like personal experience. And when I got into my early 40s, I thought to myself, well, I really want to get involved in investigation. I want to find out what is going on. I want to be active. I don't want to be an armchair, keen person. I want to get out there and I want to actually be involved in this phenomenon. So I don't live in Melbourne. I live 3 hours east of Melbourne. So one day I drove down to Melbourne and I attended a meeting, the first UFO meeting I ever went to, which was George Simpson of a UFO who was running meetings. So I went down there and attended the meeting and started to get involved. And then at that very meeting, I met another man called Andrew Arnold who had founded Victorian UFO Action, which is the group that I'm now the director of. And to say the rest is history, effectively. So, from that point, Andrew and I got together and we started thinking to ourselves, we really need to get UFO research going in Victoria again, because we did have the Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society, ViewForce, which was here since the 50s and it petered out in the mid-2000s. So there's this gap of about 5 years where nothing was happening at all, basically. So we decided we wanted to form a group again, and we wanted our group to be not a MUFON as such. MUFON's a large organisation with a lot of a lot of things that go along with a large organisation. So our organisation's a lot smaller, and our team currently is around about 15 people. That's it. So it's a nice sized group of people who are dedicated, and we've spent our the last 5 years or so, providing a reporting centre for people. So people, if they have an encounter, they can report it to us. That's the first thing which had fallen by the wayside. No one was doing that. We've done our documentaries, which are on our UFOA YouTube channel. So if you want to YouTube BUFOA TV, don't mind my Australian accent, UFOA TV, you can see all our documentaries that we have made. Those documentaries have been about Victorian cases, talking to Victorian witnesses, researchers, the stuff that you can't see, the non-history channel, National Geographic sort of stuff. It's very much more of a grassroots approach to it. We've got our little HD camera. We go out all over the countryside talking to people and getting into the heartland of Victoria's UFO experience. So that's what we've been doing essentially. And on top of that, I've done some radio work as well. I've been on your show, other shows. I've had my own radio show, and I've also done a bit of work for National Geographic recently on a series that they had called Invasion Earth. And I did the segment on the Burke's Flat bending headlights case. So I've been involved actively for a good solid 5 years, but have always had a lifelong interest. So for those of you who don't know me, that gives you a bit of a brief rundown on who I am.
Thank you very much. So could you turn your speakers down just a little bit? I hear a little bit of feedback come back out of that. So just turn so you can still hear me, but just not so loud. Okay, let's talk about the what'd you call it? The bending headlight case. That's the car. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I got to hear that one again.
I'll just give you a little. Yeah, I've got so much good stuff for you, Martin. It's great, and I'll give you. We'll do a bit of a recap on the bending headlights case. So that occurred in April 1966, and that was a very important flap that occurred here in Victoria at that time. In fact, probably almost the best one that we've had. It started on the 2nd of April, then the 4th of April, and then the 6th of April. So over that period of time, there was 3 significant UFO events that occurred. The first one on the 2nd of April was the Baldwin photo, where a man took a photograph at close range of a silver disc, and we discussed this last time. And that ended up on the front page of the Herald Sun, which was the newspaper in Melbourne. That started it off. 2 days later, on the 4th of April 1966, a man was driving in the country for work at night, and in an area called Burke's Flat, which is just a flat, plain area, there's nothing out there, he noticed a strange light in the paddock off to his right. And as he approached it, he thought it was a tractor engaged in night ploughing. And as he got closer to it, he started to feel a tugging on his chest. and his headlights started to waver. And as he slowed right down, and as he got close to the object, his headlights bent off the road, and they were attracted to this object. And now, what was the object? He described it as an inverted ice cream cone type of a appearance. It had a white disc on top and a smaller white disc at the bottom, and there was all these tubes of light coloured light passing between the bottom of the ice cream cone to the top of the ice cream cone. And then as he approached it, he realised he was about to drive off the road because he was following his headlights. He put in a counter steer, and he narrowly avoided hitting a tree on the other side of the road. As he did that, the entire object closed up and then it disappeared. And he was very shaken, drove off to his destination, and that was it. Just a horrible experience for a man out there on the lonely country road. On the 6th of April 1966, 2 days later again, that was when the Westall school encounter occurred. So within a week, you've got those three key events. Then a couple of days later, a young man was killed at Burke's Flat at exactly the same spot when his car veered off the road and hit a tree right where Ron Sullivan had his UFO encounter. That brought Ron out because Ron thought, oh, gee, Burke's Flat, a young guy died there. I better say something. So he did. And in 1966, he was perhaps, maybe opening himself to ridicule at that time. And he came forward and said, look, I had a really weird encounter out there at Burke's Flat, a couple of days ago, and now this young man's been killed. That created a whole possibility that this young man had also had a similar experience out there. So that was the case that I got involved in a couple of years ago, and we took Ron Sullivan, the witness, back to Burke's Flat for the first time. He hadn't been there since the incident, and we filmed around that case, and we found a lot of other people. We did archive research. We found the autopsy report for the young man who was killed. So we went to a lot of effort to do that. And that's that period of time that I'm talking about. These UFO events, they tend to occur around these, it almost seems to be 10, 20-year type of cycles to get anything really, really good, something that you can really sink your teeth into. So that, to me, that case, and why did I like Burke's Flat so much? Well, the object was a really unusual object. And Ron described the object as not emitting any shadows at all. So the light was fully contained. So when he looked at it, it wasn't casting looming shadows across the trees. It just the whole light complex was contained. And he went back there the next day, day after. And when they went there, they found a depression in the paddock where it looked like a vacuum cleaner had been put on reverse and blasted this area of dirt out in the field, I should say. Paddock's a very Australian term for a field. So. And then they noticed some dead parrots were lying around in the area as well. So it was a very strange experience. And that tale, the Westall tale, the Baldwin photo, all of that had been forgotten. All of that had just, made the news of the day, and people scratched their beards for a while, and then they all moved on with life. So, and those cases laid quite still for a while. Bill Chalker, a great Australian researcher, did a visit to Burke's Flat in 1980. And did a bit of work on the case at that point in time. Westall had disappeared into urban legend basically at that, for a long time. And then over the time, these cases started to gain traction again. And so these large cases started to get researchers interested in them. We started doing the work that perhaps should have been done at the time or couldn't have been done at the time, or, we start looking at it with 21st century eyes. And I think that's helped these cases bring them back to life for people, so that people can now look at these cases and go, wow, something actually really did happen back then. These were credible people. These students were credible. The teachers saw that UFO at Westall. Ron Sullivan was a businessman. He had no reason to make any of that up, and there was supporting evidence there. Mm-hmm. So very, very, very good stuff, and it's all part of our state's rich tapestry of UFO reports. And people ask me all the time, well, you're a UFO researcher. Where do UFOs appear? And I say UFOs appear everywhere. And I go, now don't think I'm nutty when I say that to you, because if you actually go back and study the record, every region of our state, every area has a UFO history. Doesn't mean it's happening all at once in every location, but But at some point in time, whether it's been Melbourne, whether it's been the northeast, the southwest, East Gippsland, where I live, the northeast, the mountain ranges, the high country as we call it, all those areas have got really good UFO stories, and they disappear. They get lost. People don't report them. They tell a few friends, they have a bit of a giggle, and they forget about it. But groups like mine, Victorian UFO Action, we get out there, we dig for this stuff, and a little bit later I'll tell you about another great case, but that process. But yeah, it's those cases have really come back to life, and there's lots of things that people can do. There's a great documentary called Westall 66, A Suburban Mystery, made by Shane Ryan and Rosie Jones. I'll just say, everyone's homework for the day, YouTube that video and watch it. It's one of the best UFO documentaries that I've ever seen. I think they've done a tremendous job of it. So it's Westall 66, A Suburban Mystery. If you YouTube that, you will definitely find it, and I encourage everybody to watch that if you've not seen it.
Okay. Hey, Ben, can you turn your camera off for a minute? I'm going to see if that's you're having a bit of a Skype lag, and I'm going to see if that might cure that. So go ahead and shut your camera if you would. Now, on this particular case you were speaking of, the bending lights, or I think that's what you called it, it's very interesting when you said that UFO disappeared. I want to talk a little bit about that because there's another question I have. What do you make of that? I've heard of people saying that a UFO all of a sudden just plain disappears.
Well, it's really interesting, and from a lot of stuff that a lot of cases that I look at, you say, well, did the UFO disappear or did it take off? Did it just disappear as in like it just dissolved? Did it disappear as in like it instantly just evaporated, or did it like shoot off from point A to point B and then you never saw it again? So it's a very interesting thing, and I think all those things do happen. I think different UFOs behave in different ways. Ron has said that his UFO shot straight up into the sky, that it disappeared in an instant, that it was gone. It was there and then bang, off it went. So in other reports that I've looked at, and I've got a really great little one here where the UFO has gone and there's still been traces of the UFO in the area after its departure. Really weird stuff. So where are they coming from? That's all linked to that, I think, to the way they behave. If it's a dimensional thing and they can manipulate our space and our time, then there's all manner of things that they can do that. If they're a little bit more advanced than us and it's kind of point A to point B sort of processes going on there, then they've got a hardware that just operates slightly better than our fastest jets can operate, and they're not that far ahead of us. But if they're coming from other dimensions, if they've got some sort of I hate using the word technology because it may not even be a technology in the way that we think about it. They might have the ability to, as I said, manipulate that time and space and do all sorts of things, make it stand still, come and go as they like. So there's a whole hour discussion in that alone, I think, Martin.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So back to the car itself, the first car, the one that did not get in an accident, was there any permanent disfiguration of his headlamps or anything like that, or anything that was unusual about his car after that incident?
No, mundanely, no. The car was as per normal. It didn't have any traces of some sort of mysterious residues, or that its lights were physically bent and they were broken. There was nothing like that. And we tried to find the car. We knew it was a long shot, but we went looking for the car to see if we could find it anywhere. Maybe some collector had it or whatever. But the registration was a no longer a current registration. So unfortunately, we couldn't find it. So that was a bit disappointing. They did get the headlight off the crashed car. That was found at the time by Paul Norman, who was the head of Viewforce at the time, or their lead investigator. He found one of the headlights off the crash car. But there was nothing to be revealed from that. And I don't know whether now we would find something that maybe would have been on those lights, but back in the 70s, when he probably tracked down that headlight, there probably wasn't the technology to look at it, and nobody knows where that headlight is now.
Right. Now, going back, you mentioned something when you were talking about the organization that you're head of. There was a previous organization. What was that called again?
That was called Viewforce, Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society.
And a question I have, a number of UFO organizations have faded away in the past, and I just wondered what your thoughts on why that happens, or in particular case of the one you may know of. What makes a membership? Does it have anything to do with less sightings, or does a membership just get tired and no new blood, or how can one fail like that?
Well, you just about hit the nail on the head with that last statement. It was an organisation that it was very, very structured in a kind of an old school kind of a way, with committees and minutes and meetings and all of that type of structure around that thing, like an old school club would be. Perhaps a Rotary Club or something. I'm not sure, but it was very much an old school type of structure. The people who were in it for a very, very long time, decades. And what they probably failed to consider was some type of a succession plan. So that when the old stayers' time was up, they didn't have the young blood coming through. They didn't have the people in place to pick up the torch and keep the good work going. And what happened was that basically all their information just scattered to the wind at that point. So it all became lost. Certain people had this and certain people had that, and other bits of information just went outright missing. So it was a real tragedy in the fact that the organisation was around for 40 to 50 years, such a long period of time, and in the end it just imploded. It just collapsed. They didn't have the people to. The website's still up. You can still go look at the website, but there's no information on there. Hasn't had any updates in years. So.
Okay, so let's talk about
it. Just ran to.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a lag here still, and I might have to ask you for your phone number, and I know your country code. So if you would go ahead and text in the Skype right now, just text your phone number if I lose you, and I'll ring you back. VUFOA, or however you say that, the Victorian UFO Action. I just wondered what you actually do with the reports that you get. Are they digitally kept?
Yes, that's right. So we have we have two ways for people to report cases to us. They can do it via email. And interestingly, Martin, we created a hotline. Now, the hotlines are very, very problematic. They're rarely used for what they're intended for. The idea of a hotline is that someone is having a real-time UFO experience, can give you a call and report what's going on. It never ends up getting used like that. So we're on the cusp of actually ditching the hotline service. So the majority of our reports, we're now directing people through email.
And how would the thing I always think about is when I personally had a sighting, and that I had just not thought of any way of reporting it. It just didn't occur to me that there was something online. How would someone have found your hotline? Would it have also been only through the internet?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if you Google, report UFO Victoria, we come up. So we come up if you type in report UFO and you're in our state. We're the first website that'll appear. So it does mean people will get the number, and it's not that often that I had the phone for quite a while myself, and you'd get the occasional call, but it's usually someone not reporting a UFO. So we found that having that, we've still got it. It's still there in hope that that it'll actually ring with something of interest one day. But for the most part, I think most people in this day and age are probably more comfortable to email you rather than to phone you. So the idea was that, we're looking at a UFO right now. Oh my God, lots of stuff, but it hasn't worked out that way.
I think I'm going to try to ring you on your phone. So, do you have your phone with you? Okay.
I do.
So, we're getting a lot of lag. So let me try to ring you, and go ahead if you wouldn't hang up on Skype, and I'll try to ring you back.
Sure thing.
Okay, hang in for the live listener. We're going to try to make this work. And I might end up Skyping him back if this doesn't work. Here we go. Just to can you hear me? There you
Hello.
are. Thank you. It could actually be on my end. To be fair to you, it could be on my end because of this horrific thunderstorms here. First of the year. Anyway, but let's give it a try, see how this goes.
Well, yes. Nothing like a storm.
Okay. Can you say that again?
I said, yes, there's nothing like a storm to throw a bit of chaos.
Yes, right. Okay, so one of the cases I had wanted to bring up to you, and I believe I tried last time we spoke, was there is some case in California where people were driving along a highway and they saw this craft land. Are you familiar with that case?
No. Well, a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I think you're the second Australian that wasn't familiar with it, so maybe I have the wrong country. Very well could.
That's all right, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some of the other. I want to talk about some of the cases that you've been working on that you mentioned earlier that were less known, because those really fascinate me as well. Can you talk about one that comes to mind?
I certainly can. How much time have we got left?
Oh, we got a whole hour.
Oh, good. That's great. That means I can really get stuck into it.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, I've got so much really cool stuff, and I hope everyone go charges their drinks and settles in for a bit of a good listening session here. The case I want to talk about is from my region, which is in eastern Victoria. If you look at the map, it's the pointy end in the east. Basically, this incident is what I love about this incident is the fact that it occurred to farmers first of all. And I love farmers; they are pretty much salt of the earth, and they don't have time for nonsense and fun and games. So that I like. The object that they encountered, really unusual object. That's the second thing that I really like about it. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown as to what happened and a little bit of the investigation process that I went through. So this incident occurred at 11 o'clock at night on the 28th of January, 1976. So it's a while ago. But the case itself is an absolute ripper, and I love it. I love it to bits. So who was involved? There was two farmers, and the case occurred in a really small town called Dargo. That's quite Australian. And Dargo is up in the high country, which is the mountain area in the eastern part of our state. It's about an hour from where I live. So it's very remote. You basically drive in there and you drive out again. That's really what it's like, and it's surrounded by high mountains that are very, very forested, and it's a very remote location. So these two farmers, they were actually what we would call a share farmer. So they were looking after a gherkin crop, which is like pickles, So they'd pick gherkins all day long, and then they'd go home at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd leave a water pump running to water the crop, if you're following what I'm saying. So they'd go home, they'd leave the water on, the water would water the crop. Then at about 11 o'clock at night, they'd drive back, and it was about a 5 or 6K drive, kilometres I'm saying, back across to the field, and they would turn that pump off, and then they'd drive home again and go to bed. So just, mundane, rural activities. So on this particular night, the 28th of January 1976 at 11 o'clock, they hop in their car and they head off. Now, as they're leaving town, the Dargo is a really small place, they noticed they saw this light buzzing around, and they thought it was a shooter's spotlight. If hunters go at night, they'll have a spotlight, and they'll point the spotlight at a kangaroo, and then they'll blast it to bits. So that's what they thought they were looking at. This little light was out flying around, and all of a sudden, the light took an interest in their car. So they're driving along the road, and the two witnesses were, one was a female, one was a male. She was in her 40s at the time, about 42, and it was her cousin, the male who was driving the car. He was 19. So they're driving in the dark, heading up this road, and this little light that's flying around in the paddock suddenly takes an interest in them. It starts to pace the car. Now, at this stage, they're just a bit puzzled about this light. What's this thing out here? It's following us. So they're driving along. They go through a deep cutting in the road, and they enter a treed section, and the road starts to wind through the trees. At this point, they lose sight of the object, and they just go, well, that was a bit strange, and, we'll just head on our way. They turn off the main road, which is a tar road, over onto a dirt track, and there's a little bridge. As they go over the little bridge, they look across to the right, and they see this white light is right where they are again. What's this thing doing here? Then the light goes up the hill ahead of the car, and they start driving up the hill. The light's gone ahead, and at the top of the hill, the light stops, and it waits for the car to reach the top of the hill. When they reach the top of the hill, they see that the object is a small ball, a sphere. It's about 2 feet across. It has two, I'm going to call them fins, that come out horizontally from it, about a foot or so. And then it has two more fins coming out at a 45 degree at the base. So it's got 2 fins underneath it and 2 fins horizontally. And it has like these are my words, it has like an eye on the front of it. So this small object is hovering just above a farm gate. And as they approach, all of a sudden, the object shines a tremendous blast of light onto the car. And it lit up the entire area for hundreds of feet around like broad daylight. And the witness, when I tracked the witness down, she described it as being a hot heat. This little object that was 2 feet across with its fins shone a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of light that turned that darkened country location into an absolute daylight situation. So the farmers continue driving. And they were pretty scared by this point in time. So they drive down the hill on the other side, and this object just floats out across next to them on the right, and they can see it up through the trees, and it's following them down to where they have to go to open a gate to go down to where they turn the water off. So as they get to the gate, they jump out of the car, open the gate, drive through, shut the gate. The object's just hovering silently in the sky, following them. They drive down to the river, which I've been out to the location. It's probably around about half a kilometre. They drive down there. They stop the car. The object comes across, and it stops above them, and it waits. As they sit there, scared out of their brains that this thing is taking such an active interest in them. One of them jumps out, turns the pump off. They hop back in the car. They squeal the tyres, and they drive back across the field at about 60 miles an hour. Really scared. The object follows them back up. They hastily go through the gate, back up the hill. When they get to the top of the hill again, this little object shines another tremendous blast of light over their car. They drive down, back onto the main road, and then they drive home. White as ghosts, and they get out. The woman's mother says, "What happened to you?" And we said, "We just had this horrible, horrible experience out on the road where this light just chased us and shone this tremendous light on us." So when I read about this case, which was given to me by one of my team members in an old yellowed Australian UFO bulletin, I thought to myself, this is a really good case. It's a really great little case. I want to try and find out, where this occurred. And fortunately, the description had a really good description of where it occurred. Now, I kind of knew the area, but not intimately. So me and my partner Lana, we hopped in the car and we basically drove up to Dargo, and we spent an afternoon reading the information that we had. There was no street names listed or road names listed. We just had to go purely by description in this yellowed old journal. And we went into Dargo and we asked at the general store, does anyone know about it? And we sort of, didn't really get anywhere there because the people were quite new. They'd only been in Dargo for 5 years, not like 40, 50 years. So we hopped back in our car and we drove back out, and we found the road, and we followed the whole track through, the deep cutting, the bridge, up the hill, down the hill. We found the exact gate where the object had shone the brilliant display of light over the car. And so we were really stoked. We were happy that we'd found this actual location. So we were able to follow the exact route that the witnesses had taken. We were able to go right down to the farm gate. We didn't go onto the private property, but we drove right down to the farm gate. We had a good handle on the geography of what they had done, of the experience. So, and they said that the object seemed to go higher as they went down to the paddock. But the thing was with that basically the object didn't descend; it just stayed at the exact height. They descended down to where the fence was, and the object just remained at the same trajectory from the height. So that's what they actually did. So we had a really good handle on the geography of it. And when we went back home that night, I actually posted onto Facebook that we'd been to Dargo. We'd done this little investigation, and one of my friends on Facebook said to me, "I'm from Dargo. Perhaps I can find out a bit more information for you." And so what she did was she said, "My auntie lives up there. She's been there for 40, 50 years. I'll ask her." So she asked her auntie, and gave me her auntie's phone number, and I rang her, and she said, "Oh, yes, oh, that'll be Mary. Mary had a strange encounter 40 years ago. I go and I water her ducks every day for her. So if you want to come, we'll go around and we can have a chat with her."
Wow. Small world, huh?
So we got very, very lucky by So we got very, very lucky that that was actually the case. So we went back to Dargo the following weekend, and we were able to go and meet the original witness, who's now in her 80s, and we were able to have a chat with her. Now, the woman was terrified, absolutely terrified, and she didn't even really want to talk about it. And this is one thing that investigators have to remember, that, these people have had to them it's a horrible experience. And we basically, we had to sit down, and we had a cup of tea with her and some scones or biscuits, as you guys call them. And we sat there and we spoke about cooking walnuts and all sorts of stuff. And eventually we got around to, being able to earn her trust and start talking about the incident. And she confirmed to us that this was an absolutely horrible experience. She had lived in Dargo her entire life, and since that incident, she said she never drove around Dargo at night, ever since that incident in 1976. She never drives around there at night. So she was very, very, very scared of what had occurred to her. Now, they also knew the young man who was her cousin, and they said, "Look, give him a ring. He might talk to you." And he'd be in his 60s now, or late 60s. So, funny story is he actually lived about 60 metres away from where I lived at the time, and basically I rang him up, and he didn't want to talk about it.
All right, so thank you so much. That's it for the free part of the show. We do get better audio in the second part of the show. And if you'd like to support us for only $2 or more a month, all that information is on podcastufo.com. You get to listen to all the shows, plus our Everything Else show comes out once a week on that as well. All right, so we'll be back next week with Linda Zimmerman. She's going to be talking about more UFOs over New York skies. Interesting show. And that's it. So remember to keep your eyes to the sky, and we'll see you next week.